that sermon series mostly because we only had 2 weeks this year from that sermon series of Jesus in lectionary. And I thought, let's explore it then a little bit, have a few extra times. It wasn't because I knew that the Lenten Ash Wednesday readings already had a Sermon on the Mount text. But I did know that, and it was a very nice coincidence to start this series off. Matthew 6 is the second chapter of, I can't remember if it's 3 or 4, I think it might be 4 chapters in Matthew that we call the Sermon on the Mount. It's right there in the middle. It's part of Jesus' major address. It is the part of it where Jesus tells us we should never pray in public. I didn't actually say that in case you thought you were getting away with never praying in public, friends. There's a lot going on here. But at its heart, what this passage in Matthew is really inviting us to do, and what we will actually do in the next couple of weeks in our sermon series and other series during Lent, is reflect on how our life is lived out beyond words and actions. So let our faith show not only in our words and our supposed beliefs, but also how we allow those words and beliefs to shape our lives. So let me say more. As I already said, Jesus is not alluding in this passage to all types and all kinds of prayer. Now, not everyone here is great at praying out loud and in public, and that's really okay. But if you aren't, you think you can look at Matthew 6 and say, look, Jesus says never to do it. Well, it's okay not to have that gift, but that's not what he's actually saying. What he's actually saying is don't pray in ways that are used to build yourself up. What Jesus doesn't want is his followers to use prayer or use almsgiving or use fasting as a way to show how religious they are. So others might look at them and say, oh, they're so spiritual. It's good to be spiritual. And actually, I'm going to say it aside, it's actually a good thing if people look at you and somehow think about your spirituality, but not because your prayers are so grandiose and so wonderful, or your almsgiving is so amazing, or because your fasting is so thorough and so often. What Jesus doesn't want is performative religion, prayer as propaganda. What he doesn't want is us to use the practices of our faith and have them be the extent of that faith. But instead, I'm going to suggest more deeply in a second, what he wants is others to look at how we live our lives and have that be the thing people see. That they say, oh, I have seen how they live out their faith, and that's how I want to be. Example, we will have a chance of ashes on our foreheads and hands in just a little bit. And I hope that you will consider coming down. It's a reminder of our mortality, a reminder of the ways we have failed to live up to God's ways, a reminder of all the things we still need God's grace and mercy for. But if you only come down and get ashes because everybody else is doing it, you can just stay in your seats. I mean, if it's meaningful, the point isn't to come down because we're doing it. The point is to come down because you want to experience what that might mean to you. Do you want to experience that ash on your body or the blessing I will give you in the front? That in that moment you're seeking not just the sign of the cross, but something that reminds you of the part of your faith that needs the sign of the cross, that needs that mercy. Jesus does not call us to do performative faith that others might see us. Jesus invites us to be transformed, to be changed, to be people whose lives reflect our faith, to live in ways that we don't have to pray out loud deeply every day to others who know we're faithful. That our lives reflect it and show it and live it out. I'll give you one example from a person in my last call who I thought did this actually. Although he would deny there was anything about his faith because he was stubborn like that. There was a man named Tom in my last church, and he was a lawyer, and he used to walk from his house to his practice every single day, rain or shine. And he told me once, in a private conversation, that really he'd almost be insulted I'm telling you about, because he didn't like sharing that part. But he would stop on his walk at the school, at the butcher shop, and say a quick 30-second prayer. Not showy, not a way that drew attention to that, but simply a way to affirm in his life that God was there to pray for those people, those places of business, those students, those teachers, those businessmen, that he might bless them by prayer. That is the kind of thing that God invites us into. And if we need more clues what that might look like, well, that's why on Ash Wednesday we get not just Matthew chapter 6, but also Isaiah 58. Isaiah 58 is written to the people of God, and Isaiah has much the same to say as Jesus. They too had lots that they did. They had grand festivals, they had big worship services, probably an ash on their foreheads, but lots of the ringing of the bells and the blaring of trumpets and sacrifices at the newly rebuilt temple. And through Isaiah, God says to them, none of that matters. None of that is meaningful to me as Yahweh. None of that is what I want if it's not also accompanied by actions that care for others. Is this not the fast I choose, Isaiah says, to loose the bonds of injustice, to undo the straps of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, to share your bread with the hungry, to bring the homeless into your house, we see naked, to cover them, to be a people, to borrow Jesus' words from Matthew 25, to care for the least of these, who seek after the ways of justice and righteousness and shalom, who yearn for and strive for a world where all have enough, not just to live and survive, but to thrive, to yearn for and work for a world where no one is hungry, where all have shelter for the night, where no one stands in need. Isaiah invites us into a true worship of God, where we seek out to be the lovers of God's people, who do justice and righteousness and mercy and love. That's the task that God calls true worship. That's the task that Jesus and the whole rest of the Sermon on the Mount will call true worship. Here in Lent, we often give things up. It's a good reminder. Maybe instead of, or in addition to giving things up, we can try and add an act of love each day. What if, in honor of these passages, we called a friend who was grieving, or brought items to the food pantry, said a prayer for our neighbor, or give a ride to somebody to the hospital? What if during this Lenten season we recommit ourselves each and every day to work for the kingdom, not just through our words, but in how we love one another and how we strive to love the world? What if? Friends, I think that what if is our call. I think that what if is what true religion looks like for Jesus, for the God of Isaiah, for our God. I think that what if, striving to love people in our lives and actions, is how we are called to live out our lives. Here during these 40 days, not counting Sundays, and all the weeks and years to come. That could be world-changing. That would be the true worship of God. that Christ calls us into. Thanks be to God.